Hey folks, welcome back for another episode of Code Club here on the Riffomonas Professional Development YouTube channel. In today's episode, we are going to be creating this figure that was published in the New York Times last month or earlier in this month. And this plot, or the data in this plot, has caused a bit of a kerfuffle here in the United States. It is showing the monthly change in the number of jobs in the United States, going back to July of 24 through July of 2025. As I'm recording this, we're at the end of August. And the kerfuffle is around the data from May and June. The initial statement of the number of jobs changed for May and June was at about 140,000 new jobs for each of those months. When the Bureau of Labor Statistics makes an announcement of the number of jobs for a month, it's a projection, right? So they're dealing with the data that's coming in, but that's subject to change as more data comes in for that month. An analogy that I can think of immediately is that I have accounts at the University of Michigan where I am a professor, and they're not actually able to get me the budget or the balance in my account until maybe a month or two later, right? And so there's kind of what you see that has hit the account. And then as more stuff kind of percolates through the system, the balance may go up or down a little bit. Usually for my budgets, it goes down, sadly. And so in this case, for May and June, the projection was revised down significantly, right? So it went from like 140,000 down to about, 20,000 or 15,000 new jobs for each of those months. This made President Trump very unhappy. That led to him firing the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so this, again, has caused a kerfuffle because it's been unheard of to fire people because you don't like the data, right? And so this is worrisome, right? Because if we're going to fire people because you don't like the data, then are we going to start making up data so we help people keep their jobs? And my understanding from all the reports I've read from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is that every month they use the same method and they get the same types of estimates. And so these 2 months were weird for some reason, but it wasn't one person's fault. It wasn't the method's fault necessarily. It's a quirk in the data. And my understanding is that this is more likely to happen when there's been kind of a perturbation to the economy. So anyway, putting that aside, I thought this was an interesting plot, and I would like to make this with you in ggplot2 and using other tools from the tidyverse. And so why did I think it was interesting? Well, first of all, the story was interesting. Second of all, is that if you look at this, it is a stacked bar plot, okay, of sorts, right? That for July of 24 through April of 25, it's a solid gray bar, one category. But then for May and June, you can think of these as being like a stacked bar, right? So that's cool because you have the white rectangle on top and the gray rectangle on the bottom. There's some interesting things going on with color here. So again, with the white rectangle on top, they have a gray border around the rectangle, right? Also, July then, where they added 73 jobs in July, again, subject to revision, it's a goldish color, right? So I thought the color was pretty cool. They have these 3 captions that are embedded in the data. So growth in May and June was lower than initially estimated. The number of jobs added in July, and then stating that this was revised downward. One of the things also I noticed, if you look very closely, is that the grid line, the horizontal grid line, I'm pretty sure it goes behind the bars, but there's a bit of an alpha being applied because if you look really closely, let me see if I can do that. If you look very closely in these white bars, you can see a fainter set of dots, say here, compared to over here, right? And so how would you do that, right? So that's cool. And of course, the New York Times has their own style of putting the numbers on the y-axis on the grid line rather than to the left of a y-axis line. That's cool. We also have dates on the x-axis, which is interesting. And then also the figure, the panel itself is kind of nudged over to the right, if you will. There's a bit of a margin on the left side that's different than the margin we see for like the title and the caption, okay? So there's a few things that are interesting here beyond the data that I wanted to explore with you all here on this live stream. As always, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop those in the chat, and I will read off those. I'd love hearing where people are coming from. So it's great to see Rents and Mike and James coming in. Got James and Robert are coming from Canada. And then Mark, welcome for coming for the first time from the UK. I think Mike is also in the UK, and Rents, I believe, is in the Netherlands. So great to have new people joining us and to have old timers as well. And again, if you have questions along the way, feel free to holler. I do my best to incorporate that feedback as we go through all of this, okay? So that's where we're going. We're going to be creating this plot today. So let me show you where this is coming from. The New York Times. I have a free version of this. I'm not going to worry about the legality of archive.is for the moment, but if you want to get a free version of the article, it's here. This is the plot at the top, along with an article here by Madeline, I will say no, that describes what's going on, right? And perhaps why it's going on. And there's some articles about the revisions down by a total of 258,000 total jobs, right? And then a variety of other plots that we could think about making or not. So I think this will occupy most of our time for today, recreating this, okay? And this plot, again, is published in the New York Times with data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and was created by Christine Zhang. So if we go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, let me again grab this link for you and paste that in. And hey, Trevor, thanks for joining us from Virginia. Hope you're having a good morning over there. And let me make this a little bit larger so you all can see it more easily. So that link brings you to a set of downloads. And so these are what are called the B tables of the employment situation news release, right? And so I think we're going to want that employment situation news release later, but we'll come back to that. And so in kind of my initial exploration of this, I found that this first link, employees on non-farm payrolls by industry sector and selected industry detail, is what we want. And so I should also pause to remind you that I have a weekly newsletter that I put out weekly during the summer. Not quite weekly, but I've been doing pretty well lately. And in that weekly newsletter, I go through visuals like this one, right? And so I covered this one a couple weeks ago. And what I do in the newsletter is I try to describe the visual at like a 30,000 foot view and kind of how I would go about getting the data, recreating the data. There's not a lot of code. It's more of kind of talking through my observations, what I like about the plot, what I don't like about the plot, how I might do different things. And so you can get subscribed to that if you go to rifamonas.org. And if you come to the bottom, you'll see there's a place where you can subscribe to the mailing list. It is a free mailing list. And just like these videos are free, if you want to dig deeper into learning R or other practices of reproducible research, I encourage you to check out this link up here for upcoming workshops. I'm doing a Transform Your Data Visualization workshop in September. We might do that again in October or November. I also have a variety of workshops covering R using either data from microbial ecology, which is my research field, as well as data from just kind of general data, things like climate, epidemiology, demographics, I think that's it. And then I also have a software package called Mother that we teach workshops on. And so if you want to check out any of these workshops, encourage you to click on those, email me if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. But certainly encourage you to subscribe to the mailing list so you can be alerted of the upcoming workshops as well as figures like this. And if you have ideas for figures that you'd like to see me cover in future newsletters or in future live streams, by all means, let me know. I've certainly had people do that. And I think next week, so the week after, is going to be coming from somebody who did just that. And so I really appreciate those suggestions. All right. So, and Saeed is joining us from Somalia, and Lori is coming in from Toronto. Wonderful. We've got a few people joining us from Toronto in Canada. I'm probably about an hour and a half from Canada. Canada's due east of me where I live in Michigan, and we absolutely love Canada. So again, we're at this table B1, and so the data that we want is total non-farm. And if we look back at the figure, we see that the data is seasonally adjusted. And so if we do seasonally adjusted total non-farm, click that, and this is going to be reported in thousands, right? And so scrolling down, let's see, we can go ahead then and retrieve the data. And we get this table that we can download as a Excel workbook. And so we see in here that there are 2 months that have preliminary data. So this one for June as well as for July. These are total jobs, right? So it's not the change. So once we download this, we're going to have to go ahead and reformat it and then calculate the monthly change in the number of jobs. So we'll want this Excel workbook that I see linked here. And I'm wondering if I can right click and let's see. Oh, well, let me copy the link. I don't think it's letting me copy the link. So that's no fun. All right, so it downloaded it to my downloads directory. And so I will go ahead then and copy this to my desktop and then into my jobs numbers directory. And so we see that in there now, okay? So it's not exactly in the format that I'd like it to be in. Typically, I prefer to be able to download things directly because something else I should mention to you all is that if you want to get the code that I'm generating today, you can go down below in the description for this episode and you'll find a link to a blog post where I then share all of the code as well as any relevant links. And so this is what the spreadsheet looks like that is coming to us from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? And so you might be tempted to go ahead and delete rows 1 through 12, right? And make it not have this header. We're not going to do that because I want to do everything in R. And there's a principle called raw. So to keep your data raw and so that we can document everything we've done as much as possible. And that's one of the main reasons why I also like to be able to directly download the data from a link rather than saving it to a local directory. I guess the advantage of saving it to a local directory is that sometimes things happen with government data, right? And so, I suspect perhaps these data will change, right? So next month when the August numbers are released and the June and July numbers are updated, those numbers might change. So if you wanted to see exactly what it looked like today, then downloading it like we have is a good thing to do. So you'll see a couple of red triangles in the upper right corners of these two tabs, and those are being marked as being preliminary data, okay? All right, let's head over to RStudio and we'll get going with our fun. And yeah, so I am starting a new script, jobnumbers.r. I've loaded the tidyverse. Actually, I need to load the tidyverse. And then I have a ggsave statement in here already that is going to create a PNG file eventually that has the same aspect ratio as the original figure, which again is this figure that we are going to try to create. So I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller so we can go back and forth. I've called this one original. This is what I got from the New York Times. And then we're gonna have our own that we're gonna create. And we're going to try to make a plot that looks as close to this as I can get it to look, okay? So yeah, so let's go ahead and dig in here. And so we're gonna read in an Excel workbook. And if I look at my Files tab here, you'll see that there is this file here, which is the Excel workbook, okay? Let me see if I can try this again. No. Actually, no. I think if I right click on this, oh, copy image address. See, it's saving it as an image rather than as the actual data. Let me go ahead and inspect this and see if it shows me the data that's behind it. So it's hiding the Excel workbook. Let me see if I can search through here for XLS. Okay, that's download and download. So it's not giving me the link that I want. So I think if I do copy image address, that is going to be the button, which is being stored as a GIF. So that's not what I want. So we'll be okay. So we'll go ahead and do library read Excel. And so this is a package that makes it easy or straightforward to read in an Excel workbook. And so we can do read Excel. Gotta spell it right? And then we can go ahead and put in the path, which starts with series. And if I tab, it'll autocomplete the name of the file. So I don't have to type out all that stuff. Again, if you've never seen that before, if you're in the directory with your file, you can start typing things like ser and then hit tab and it'll fill it out, giving me this full name, okay? Hey, Belantar, sorry for mispronouncing. Welcome from joining us from Algeria. That's awesome. All right, so if we run this then, and let's make this a little bit bigger, then we begin to see some complaining. It's not really complaining. It's doing exactly what we did. We had it read in the data. And so if you look at these names in the first column, those are going to correspond to these names in the first column, right? And so what we really want is the data from row 13, from A13, that cell, to M24. And so we can do that by adding to this a range argument. And so we can do A13 colon, and what did I say, M24? And that then gets us the table that we want, right? And so for August, September, October of 2025, we see that we get NA values, and then we also see that there's two more columns off the right side of the screen for November and December. All right. Cool. So, so this is getting it in, which is great. And so now what we'd like to do is go ahead and make the data tidy, right? I, for now, want to leave the months capitalized, if that makes sense, because I can foresee wanting, if I'm going to have the data plotted on the x-axis, then I'm going to want like January 1st of 2024, right? And so to get the parsing right, I think I want those months to be capitalized. And so I'm going to leave that the way it is. Normally, I would make everything lowercase, but for now, I'm not going to worry about those column labels. I've certainly seen far worse column labels than these. So let's go ahead and do pivot longer, and we'll do minus year. And what this then does is gets us the year, the name, and the value. And so the value, we could change that to, could say like values 2 equals number of, I gotta put an underline, of jobs. And then we could say names 2 equals month, right? And so now what we see is that we have year, month, number of jobs. Again, I could make year lowercase, but I'm not gonna worry about that. I left the months uppercase because that's gonna be the value in the cell like I have here, right? So maybe to do it, just to show you how I would do it, we could do rename, and then I always get this screwed up. It's either year equals year, or it's year equals year, right? And it's complaining, column year doesn't exist. All right, so we need to switch this and do this. And so now we have all lowercase column names. There's other things we could do like rename all to lower, things like that, but I'm not gonna worry about that. So now we have our year, month, and our number of jobs. But we don't want the number of jobs. We want what? We want the change in the number of jobs, right? So I'm seeing a comment here from Robert. Output as HTML and then scrape might be better. Yeah, we could do that. I'm gonna roll with this just because I think learning some of these things from Excel are also helpful to learn. And so perhaps if you're doing this as part of your research and you didn't want to have to be downloading things, perhaps you wanted to update it every month, you could do that for sure, is to download that table. And I think we did that in a previous episode, or maybe there's one coming up where we're going to do that. I'm losing track of time. But for now, I'm going to roll with Excel. But certainly getting the HTML and then scraping it would certainly work as well. All right. So now what we want to do is a mutate to get change, or let's say new jobs, right? And so new jobs is going to be kind of the rolling difference from month to month. And so of course we're going to want to make sure that our months are in order, which they are. So from 2015, January, all the way down. And so what we want is the change in jobs, right? And so I think what we'll do is, I always forget if it's lag or lead. So we'll do lag on number of jobs. And so what I'm looking for, I think I got it right, is that I want the previous month's number of jobs here, right? And then what I can do is I can subtract this value from this value to get the number of new jobs. So we'll do number of jobs minus the lag in the number of jobs. And again, this is in thousands. That's what we saw from the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, right? All right, cool. So, but this has data in it that we don't really want, right? And so let's go ahead then and make a date column. And I guess I can do that within this mutate. So we'll do date equals, and then I'm going to do paste year, month, and then day, or day is going to be, I'll set as the first, right? And then I'll do sep equals a hyphen. And so now what we get is the date formatted as it is, and it's currently formatted as a character type, right? To get it to be a date type, so that we can do all sorts of things with dates, I can use the YMD function, and that's coming to us from lubridate, right? And lubridate is coming with the tidyverse, right? And so if we run this, we now see that the date has been changed to be a 4-digit, 2-digit number, and that the type of that column is date, right? Cool. Now what I could do would be to say, like, let me put this back up here, filter date greater than, and we're going to want, I guess, greater than or equal to what? July 1st of 2024. So we'll do 2024 0701. So let me see if I need to convert that to a date format or if it'll do it automatically. Looks like it did that conversion for me automatically. And so we start with 2024 0701. But I also want the date less than or equal to 2024 0701, and that needs to be 2025, not 2024. And that didn't work. Oh, I didn't change the number. All right, there we go. Now we have our data for between July 1st of 2024 and July 1st of 2025. And if we look at our original plot, let's double check that these numbers make sense, right? And so this looks about 88, goes down to 71, up to about 240, down to 44 here, right? So these numbers all make sense. And then we know from this annotation that there were 73,000 new jobs in July, which is what we see here. So the data look good, great. One thing to think about is that these are the revised numbers, 19 and 14, right? And so I want to then add on the preliminary numbers, right? And so maybe what I'll do is go ahead in here and add a type. And I will then say real, I don't know, for lack of a better name. And then we'll add on the May and June 2025 preliminary, and we'll set that type as preliminary. So I need to find those preliminary numbers. So let's go back, and I'll go ahead and close this stuff. And if we come back, again, it says that this is employment situation news release. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that in there. And let's say like June 2025. And you can see I've already been here, right? Let's see. Let's see if there's a revision. I think I saw it down here. So it's talking about June, July. All right. Revisions for May and June were larger than normal, right? The change in total non-farm payroll estimate for May was revised down by 125,000 from 144,000 to 19,000, right? And so again, we have 19,000 for May. The change for June was revised down by 133,000 from 147,000 to 14,000. Okay. And so I'm going to put in, I could put in the change or I could put in the actual number. I'm going to put in the actual number because I want to show you something along the way. And so we want 144,000. So in here then, I'm going to go ahead and add to my pipeline a bind rows, okay? And so bind rows allows us to combine two tibbles, two data frames by the rows. And so I'm going to make a tibble, and we'll have the date. And so the date then will do YMD on 2025 0501, and we'll also do 2025 0601. And we'll then do, I called it new jobs. And that is going to be 144. Again, it's in thousands. And then we'll also do 133. Okay. And so that's the date. I guess I could also go ahead and put in the year. So let's make 2025. 2025. I don't need to repeat it, but I can. Month, we'll do May and June. All right. And then we'll put in a type equals preliminary. Okay. And so now what we see is that we've added May and June at the bottom. Again, we bound those two tibbles. This itself is a 2-row tibble, right? That we've then bound to what I had back up here, right? And so now what we could think about doing is when we go to plot this data, we could set the fill to be determined by the type. We could also set the color to be by the type, right? And so that reminds me that this 2025 July data, I want it to be a different color. So I'm going to change that from real to July. And so maybe we'll come back in here and we'll say if else, and we'll do date not equal to what? 2025 0701. So if it's not that, then we'll want it to be real. Otherwise, we want it to be July. Okay. And it's unhappy because I think so it's unhappy. I know it's unhappy because I didn't get the output I wanted. It only outputted this one line, and I've got a plus sign here. So I've got a bit of a mess. So to get rid of that plus sign and get back to a prompt, I can hit escape, right? And now I need to add a parenthesis here, save it, and all the red nastiness goes away. Rerunning that, I now see that I've got July of 2025 as being July, right? Of course, if you're doing this next month or if you're watching this in the future, then you might want to adjust this for your own purposes. And there's perhaps a better way to do this if you're trying to make a plot that's constantly getting updated. That's not my use case here, but I would encourage you to think about that. You all are very smart. I'm sure you can figure that out. Okay. All right. So again, this is what we've got. We now have our tibble where we have the year, the month, the number of jobs, new jobs, date, and type. If we wanted to simplify this a bit, we could do select, and we could then do date, new jobs, and type. And that will then get us a 3-column tibble with 15 rows. And we ultimately have, I believe, yeah, 13 total dates, which if you count these bars, there's 13 bars, okay? Cool. All right. So again, this is the plot we're trying to recreate. We now have the data, and what we'd like to do now is go ahead and bring this data into ggplot to make the plot that we want, all right? So, of course, feel free to ask questions or make comments along the way here. Don't let me do all the input. I love it when you all give feedback or ask questions. That's the benefit of doing this as a live stream versus me recording and posting and having no interaction. So I really love that interaction. So we'll do ggplot. And then our aesthetics, on the x-axis, we're going to put the date. On the y, we're going to put new jobs. And then our fill, I'm going to set as type. And then we're going to use geom call. And I realize you haven't been seeing my beautiful face as we've gone through here. So let's go ahead and pull up the new version of the plot, which doesn't quite look like theirs yet, right? Let me make this a little bit smaller so we can see both of the plots. And actually, let me go ahead and already make them the same size, and that will make it easier to see where we might need to tweak different things along the way. All right, so you can see the start of the figure, right? And I'm noticing a couple things right off the bat here that make me a little bit worried. So first of all, the preliminary data, so for May and June of 25, that May bar is higher than the April bar, and the June bar is lower than the May bar, right? And so, whereas if you look at the original, it doesn't quite work, right? And so the problem, yes, Mike says, your preliminary data will need to be subtract the actual, right? So that is certainly one way we could do it, okay? And so what Mike is saying is that we could perhaps, well, I could have put in the change in the number of jobs for the preliminary, right? Alternatively, at this point, I could also do a group by the date, and then I could calculate the difference for the preliminary, right? Or I've talked in previous episodes about the position argument in some of these, right? And so if we look at the help for geom call, then you'll see that there is a position argument, and the default is stack, right? And so there are these different position arguments that we can use. And so position stack is the default for geom call. If you come down here and do like position underscore, you'll see a variety of different position arguments. The one I'm interested in is position identity. And let's take a step back. So again, if we do position equals position stack, this is the default, right? If I did, so it's putting them on top of each other. If I do dodge, then we see that it's dodged the two columns, right? And so let's see, I think I might have the columns out of whack anyway. But what I would like is that blue bar to be on top of the green bar. And so to do that, I can do position identity. And so now we can't see the blue bar because it's behind the green bars, right? And so if I do like, can I do reverse? No. All right, let's do alpha. We'll fix this later. Alpha 0.2. You can see that the data are hiding back there. And so I'm a little bit worried that I wrote those numbers down wrong when I brought them over. So in May it was 144,000, and June 147,000. So I put 133 instead of 147. I put in the change, the 133, rather than the 147. Okay. Now we get the right ordering to those bars. But our real data is behind the preliminary data, right? And so if we want to change the order of things, we can use factors to change that order, right? And so we can do mutate on type to be a factor on type. And we can do levels. And then I can do, let's do real preliminary and July. And I might have this order wrong, but it'll be okay. And I should turn off that alpha so that we can see what's actually happening there. All right. And so that didn't do it. So let's put preliminary and then real. All right, that didn't do it. So I think I actually need to sort the data then by the date and the type. So we'll do arrange date type. There we go. We now have the real on top of the preliminary, okay? And so if you set the factor, you still need to use arrange, like we did here, to sort the data frame by the date and the type. And this way then we have preliminary goes down first, and then real, and then July, right? So we don't really care about the order except for these two positions. I wouldn't need to worry about the position equals identity if I'd calculated the difference between the preliminary and the actual count, right? Which is what Mike was suggesting. But I wanted to show that this position identity we can also use with geom call. So we can use position stack, which is the default, position dodge, which puts them side by side. There's also a dodge 2, position dodge 2 that you can also use, and then position identity that puts it right where it is. So if you're using something like geom point or geom line, the default for those is position identity, right? Cool. All right. So our plot is coming together, believe it or not, right? We basically have the geoms here, right? There's one geom, geom call to show the data. And now what we have to do is get the rest of the plot looking like the New York Times version, right? That's all we have to do. And as many people have told me in the past, I love ggplot. It takes me 5 minutes to make the plot and another hour to make it look the way I want. So we'll see. So I think the first thing I will mess with then is this fill color, right? So you think May and June are stacking? I don't think they're stacking. If we made this position stack, then the bars would go above because you would add these together. So yeah, I think we're getting it right with position identity here. Okay. So cool. All right. So like I said, let's go ahead and get those fills correct. And so again, the fill is the interior of the bar of a rectangle, and the color is the border, right? So I like to put all my scales together. And so scale is what changes like the axes, it changes the colors, the fills, the shapes, things like that. So we'll do scale, fill, manual. I had a little brain blip there. And we'll go ahead then and do values, or let's do breaks. So the breaks are what's actually in the data, right? So we'll have preliminary, real, and July. And then values are the values that we want, right? And I'm going to have to go ahead and get the July color right. So I'm going to open up my digital color meter and try to pull out those hexadecimal values. So I'll go down to utilities, digital color meter, get this out of the way, and then come over to my plot. And we could guess the gray, but it's BD, BD, BD. So I'll go ahead and copy that into the real. The preliminary is going to be white, which if I want to keep everything in hexadecimal is 6 Fs. And then July is this orange color, right? So we'll go ahead and copy that and plop that in here. And there we go. We have our gray and our white bars, and then our orange July bar, okay? So that's awesome. let's go ahead then and think about the color around the border, right? Because when we make this background white, the bars are going to disappear, right? And I could do that, but we can hold off for now. So let's go ahead and do scale color manual. And I'm going to go ahead and copy these breaks and values down. And the color, the border color for preliminary and real is going to be the same gray color. And then July doesn't have an obvious border, right? It's going to be that goldish color as well. So one other thing I need to do is I need to come back up to my aesthetics and do color equals type. And so now when I look at it, I see that I have that border. It's a little bit of a thicker border than perhaps what they have. So I can change that border thickness back up in geom_col by doing line width equals, say, 0.3. And that then gets us a thinner line. And you'll notice that the orange bar for July, I mean, it doesn't look like it has a border, but it has a border. It's just the same color as the bar itself. Cool. So let me, just to kind of highlight what this looks like, let me go ahead and remove the background and those grid lines. I'm going to ultimately add back in a grid line. So we'll get rid of all that stuff with theme. And we'll do panel.background equals element blank. So that gets rid of that background. And then we'll also do panel.grid.minor equals element blank. We don't see them, but I just want to get rid of them because it's annoying. And we'll do panel.grid.major.x equals element blank. And then we're going to have panel.grid.major.y element line. And we'll do color equals gray. Just to kind of show you where everything is. We'll come back and fix up those horizontal grid lines in a moment. But one thing that kind of stands out to me is if we zoom in, the spacing between the bars is not the same, right? So like this is February and March. And so why isn't it the same? Can you think about that? Well, I'll remove the suspense. That's because I'm putting these bars on the first of each month, and the months aren't the same lengths, right? So February is 28 days. And so between the 1st of February and the 1st of March is 28 days, but between the 1st of March and the 1st of April is 31 days. And so the bars come out looking like they've got space between them, right? Whereas in the original, there's no space between those bars, right? So, so we'll have to deal with that. So I'm going to do two more things. So Rents is asking the question of how do you get the white to be transparent so you can faintly see the dots? So I'll also point out that the gray also has some transparency, right? You can kind of see that here. So the way we deal with transparency is using what's called alpha. And I already showed alpha, right, earlier when I was trying to show that I had the bars on top of each other. So we can come into geom_col and let's do like alpha equals 0.5. And so we can see that bar going, the grid line going behind it, right? And so that does make the bar a lighter gray. Maybe we'll take that up instead of 0.5, let's do 0.8. And I think that looks pretty good. The gray is a bit lighter. Let's go ahead and make it 0.9. The gray is a bit lighter. And so whatever, I think that's pretty good. The other thing that, the bars were a bit darker before, and they were darker because I didn't have the alpha. And so what I might do would be, instead of using the hexadecimal like this, I might make it darker, right? So you could do gray, and if you then give it a number after gray, that controls the lightness. So if you do like gray 30, you can see from the background here that that's darker. Whereas if I do gray 60, that's lighter. and gray 90 is even lighter. So let's do like gray 40. Okay, that's too dark even with the alpha. So let's make it, say, 60. Still too dark. Gray 80 or 70. I think that's pretty good. So we'll go with gray 70. And I'm not going to change the border color because the border doesn't take an alpha, right? And so if I zoom in on the bar, I can't really see, you can kind of see a bit of that edge there, but I think the border line and the fill is about the same color once I've applied that alpha, okay? Cool. Yeah, so you can use scale alpha to get different alphas on different colors, right? There is a bit of a bleed through or transparency to these gray bars. So I'm not going to apply that, but you could certainly make the white transparent and the grays nothing, right? And some of this will also change. Let's go ahead and mess with that horizontal grid line. So we'll do line width equals 0.3. So that's thinner, but it needs to be dotted. And so then we'll also do line type equals dotted. And so that gets us a dotted line type. And maybe we'd want it a little bit thicker. So let's go up to a 0.4. I think it looks pretty good. The dots are a little bit further apart, I think, than theirs. And so you could do like dotted, you could do 2, that gets it dashed, or 3, that gets it dotted. You could give it a 2-digit number or a multi-digit number. So I could do like 22, and that then does something weird. But if I make that in quotes, then that makes a 2-unit dash followed by a 2-unit space, right? And so if I change that to like 1, that's too close. I'm going to stick with 2. It's not exactly what they have, but I'm cool with that. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. All right. So I'm still want to come back to this February issue, but for now, let's go ahead and get rid of the legend because that's not in theirs, and I don't think that serves any purpose at this point. And so we can come into theme and do legend.position equals none. That's the argument. And so then that gets rid of the legend off on the right side. As I'm looking at that, maybe we want to change this to 1. Oh, let's do 1, 2. I think that's better. So what that is a 1-unit tick, if I find it here, followed by a 2-unit space. And I think that looks a lot closer to what they have in their plot, okay? Thanks for joining us, Noureddin. Yeah, it's great to have you. And you're coming from Morocco, so awesome. It's great to see the international reach. I know I say that every week, but I really am just impressed by the reach of these videos and seeing people join in from all around the world. It just really makes me happy. All right, February. And so I suspect if we looked closer, we would also see that like there's a slight difference in position for like those 30 and 31 day months. But we see it most acutely with the 28-day February. And so I think what I will do is instead of doing things by date, I'm going to convert those dates to a string and then represent those strings as discrete values on the x-axis. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And we'll come back up here and I'm going to change the date to be a character. Okay, and because I have my date in the ISO standard, right? The nice thing about this ISO standard is I can sort the date as a string and it will be chronological, right? And so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll come back up here to this mutate and I'm going to add date equals as.character on date. And again, if I run all this, but not the ggplot stuff, I see that the date column is now character. and everything is still in the proper order, right? And that's even after doing this sort. So now, if I run it, I don't get any errors. Wonderful. And my bars are now equally spaced. I no longer have that problem with February being too close to March and too far from, say, January, right? Cool. So that, of course, messes up our x-axis, but we were probably going to have to mess with the x-axis anyway, right? So, cool. Now what we want to do is go ahead and reformat the labels on the x-axis, right, to match there. So they don't have dates every month. They have it every other month. And then like the July and the January have the year, right? So the first month of the year that we're showing in the data has the year with it, okay? So we can do that. Back up here with a scale. We're, again, changing a scale. We're changing the representation of an aesthetic. We'll do scale x discrete. And we're going to be able to give it our breaks and our labels. And I would like to be able to just do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way across, but I don't think I can do that. And I actually wonder if, let me comment this out for right now. I wonder if I make the date, instead of a character, if I make it a factor. So if I do factor on date, I get the same result as I had with a character, but I wonder then if I can do breaks like seek 1 to 13 by 2s. Nope, that didn't work. Or then I need to do labels, right? If I do labels, seek 1 to 13 by 2s. No. All right, I'll remove that factor. Basically, what I was trying to do is get away from having to write out those dates. I'm just being lazy. All right, so we'll go ahead and bring in the dates. So the breaks we want are going to be, again, July, September, November. So it's going to be 2024, 07, 01. And maybe I'll copy this so I don't make so many typos. September, November. And then we'll also do 2025, 0101. And I'll put this on a separate line. This will be March, May, July. So we'll get that 3, 5, 7. And so then this puts those dates right where we want them, but we want them to be formatted like what they have. And so to do that, we then need to add labels. And so then we'll do July 24, and then sept. There's no year, right? And then nov, and then Jan of 25, and then March, and then May and July. And so now we've got the dates across the x-axis labeled the way they have it. Okay. If we change to a lubridate month date, then I think they can sequence. Let's see. I think what you mean is in the labels. So if I do labels equals month, I think that works. Nope. I think it's like month. No. Let's see, month ABB. Yeah, I'm not. I think I would have to do something different. If I did LubriDate month. Oh, no, that didn't work either. That gets me the number. Yeah, I'm gonna roll with this for now. There may be a way to do it with LubriDate that I am not seeing, but this will work. Cool. All right. So thanks for that suggestion, Mark. That's a good idea. I just don't know how to do it right now. Cleaning up our axis a bit, one of the things that often drives people nuts with bar plots with ggplot is that there's a gap between the x-axis lines, right? So if I came back up here and I did, let's put it here. If I did axis.line.x equals element line, that puts the axis line down below, right? Kind of like a negative territory. Whereas what we want is it to be right up at the bottom of those bars. And so we can get rid of that space by doing, we could do scale y continuous. And we could also do it with chord Cartesian, but let's go ahead and do it with the scales. So we'll do scale y continuous, and we'll do expand equals c0, 0. And so that space at the bottom and the top is from the expand, right? And so now what you see is that we've lost that space between the bottom of the bar and the line, right? Cool. Let's go ahead then and remove the tick marks. Let's see. Okay, I'll give it a shot, Mark. Okay, so let's come back up here. If we do labels equals month, x label equals false, ABR equals true. So, I mean, I could put in the locale as well. Yeah, so like the problem is that where I'm using it here in labels, I don't know how to get it x, and x is the value of breaks. I don't know if that'll work. Yeah, it doesn't, I don't know how to get it the value of breaks. Actually, let me see something. If I do scale x discrete, let's see, breaks, limits, labels. So you can give it a function and then returns the labels as output. Okay, let's give that a shot. You're asking, so I don't want to, let's go ahead and do parse month. So that'll be the function name. And then I'll go ahead and grab this. And so we're going to make a function to parse the month, right? So we'll do what I call it parse month function. It's going to take an x. Yeah, I think this will work. If we then put in x and load parse month, that gets us the number. I think we want the label. There we go. So that gets us the month. Good. And this is just giving us the month, right? So we could say, like, if it's July or January, then tack on the year, right? And I guess one other little thing is that their SEP has a different abbreviation from what the New York Times is using, and New York Times spells out March, right? I'll go ahead and do this just to kind of show how we would do it, but we might go back to another way. I think there might be something in scales For pretty, do they have like a pretty, pretty format, date, label date short? Let's check that out. All right. So label date, labeled time. All right, label date short automatically constructs a short format string sufficient to uniquely identify labels. And so I think what we could do would be label date short. So let's try this. Oh, and that needs to have library scales. Oh, it's still unhappy. Oh, because I've got these other arguments in here. Ah, what are you unhappy with? Let's see here. Yeah, it's not liking that. What if I do label date short? Still not liking that. I'm not sure where it's complaining. So that I think it complains once I do scale x discrete. Yeah. This would take some playing with. And I wonder if, come back to help. It actually doesn't seem to be taking a value. If we do like as.date or ymd, no. I'm looking at the help and noticing that it doesn't take an X or a date. It's a label, right? And I wonder if it's upset because, did I do label date short down here? Oh, it's supposed to be parse date. Oh, yeah, that didn't work either. Oh, parse month. Oh, where did I put you? Parse month. Yeah, it's not happy. Let's see. I think if this is label, I'm already forgetting, label date short. If we put this here, I think it's expecting this to be a date. And because, yeah, because these are strings rather than dates, it's not playing well. So if we go back to this being parse month, and then we, oh, I forget what I had here already. This was month X. That gets us that. And so then, of course, if we do month, ABBR equals true, label equals true. We can get that, right? Problem is that some of these are shorter and some of them are longer. And so, yeah. Like we've got like JUL instead of July and Mar instead of March, right? And yeah. Which we could, I feel like we could make a custom function, but at the end of the day, this is easier, right? What I had here is kind of easier. I'll leave that in there if you want to play around with it, and feel free to like, I would encourage people to play with this and maybe put something in the comment if you figure out how to do this more efficiently than what I can as I'm thinking here. But I'm going to roll with this for now, where I can match their abbreviation style. I just think that to write my own function to do that, it's going to take, well, at least 12 lines of code, because I'm going to have to do it for pretty much every month, right? And that's just going to be a little tedious compared to what we've done here. So thank you for the question. And it's something I was thinking about, but it's good to experiment with that and kind of, it's a bit of a challenge. So no worries. Thanks for asking the question. That's the type of interaction that I really appreciate being able to get here in these live streams. All right. So let's see, where were we? Okay. So let's go ahead and clean up this axis a bit. So we're going to get rid of the tick marks on the X and the Y axis. So we can do that down here in theme, and we'll do axis.ticks equals element blank. So that gets rid of those ticks. Good. We could go ahead and make that line a little bit thinner on the axis. So we'll do line width 0.3. I think that's a pretty good thickness. Okay. One thing I'm remembering is that they're using something like a Franklin font. They've got a proprietary version of Franklin. We can get a Franklin-like font from Google. And so to do that, we're going to do library show text, and got that loaded. And we'll do font add Google, and we'll do Libre Franklin. I'm going to call that Franklin. So font add Google gets the font from Google Fonts. So if you go to fonts.google.com, you can see all the Google fonts there. And then we need to do show text opts and do DPI equals 300 to set the resolution. And then show text auto to load all this stuff into our system. And then if we want to set our font in the themed elements, we can do text equals element text family now equals Franklin. And put a comma there. And so now what we see is not right. I think I forgot to load this other stuff after I said I was going to load it. There we go. So that's why it's important to run that resolution and the auto statement, because otherwise things just get really wonky. All right. So kind of looking at our font and our size, I think the size is pretty good. Let's go ahead and remove the X and Y axis title. And so we can again come back up and do axis.title equals element blank. That gets rid of the X and Y axis titles. We also want to get rid of the Y axis labels. There are probably ways to do this by changing the the margin and the horizontal justification on these numbers. I'm going to remove them and then add them back in as text. So I can basically have a longer x-axis going off to the left like they do here. Okay. So you're asking if the X labels are bold. They're not bold, but they are black. Whereas theme gray, which is what the default theme is gray. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do axis.text.x equals element text, and we'll do color equals black, and then axis.text.y equals element blank. And why am I getting a red squiggle? Oh, it went away. Okay. So I don't know if you can tell the difference in color now, but that's black instead of gray. We also no longer have the values on the y-axis, okay? RStudio has Rifamonas in blue. Zoomed plot doesn't have that. Is that a video overlay? I don't know. Yeah, the RStudio text is blue down in here, if that's what you're talking about. But I think the colors between mine and theirs are the same now. Not sure. I'm not smart enough to know how to do video overlays. All right, so let's go ahead and add in the title and the caption. So I'll go ahead and copy and paste that in, and we can do that here with labs. And we'll do title equals that. Caption equals all this. All right. And I should add that I could have done like x and y equals null here in labs to get rid of the x and y. I chose to do it here with axis title equals element blank. You get the same kind of effect. Oh, and I must have forgotten a plus sign here at the end of labs because I'm getting weird output. And so now we get our title and our caption. Yeah, so Mark, your comment, to get the extra to the left, could you add xlim min as June 24th? Yes, if we were still using scale x date. If we were using scale x date because we had dates, but really what we have are character strings because we had that problem with February having weird spacing with the other months, right? So certainly you could do that. I will go ahead and do that now. And let's see. Rents asks, the plot in RStudio has Rifamonas in blue. The zoom plot doesn't have that. Yeah, I'm not seeing that. So I don't know. Anyway, so let me get the titles formatted, and then we'll deal with the left side and the right side of the plot. Okay, so both of those are in gray, and I'm going to say they're the same gray as we had up here, right? This BD, BD, BD. And so we'll do plot.title equals element text, color equals that, and then plot.caption equals element, my fingers are getting fat, color equals that. And so now, oh, that's probably too light. All right, so we'll get that a little darker. Let's do gray 40. I think that looks pretty good. Let's worry about the title and then the caption. The title font is too big. Excuse me, is too big. Let me put these right next to each other so you can kind of see. And so plot title, we'll do size equals 10. And I think that's good. So here, I think the title and the caption are a heavier font than the regular. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this face bold. But that's too thick, right? And so what I can do, I've done in a previous episode, is when I bring in the font, I could do bold.wt. And it tells us that the typical font face, oh, I lost it, is 700, right? So if I make it, say, 500, kind of reload all those things. It's not happy with me for some reason. Okay, let's try this again. Not sure what happened there. Okay, one more time. Okay, so that makes it 500. I think the regular font, when it reads it in, is 400. So it's a little bit heavier than the regular font. If we were to up it to, say, 600, then it's heavier still, right? So I think 500 is the size, the weight we want. Cool. All right. And we can maybe add a bit of margin to the top of the plot. I'll come back and deal with margins here in a bit. Let's look at the caption. So that's too big still. And I think the caption is a little bit smaller than the title. It's also right justified rather than left justified. So we'll do hjust equals 0 to get it to be left justified. Okay, so that brings it over to the left. I think that maybe is still too big. So let's make it 8. I think that's a good size, right? I'm going to change or add to the caption by Christine Zhang. I'll say Pat Schloss, just so it's clear that it's not her original, it's my reproduction. I'm going to add a margin to the top of the caption to separate the caption from the dates, right? And so here then we can do margin equals margin, t equals 10. And that moves it up a bit. And I think that's actually pretty good spacing. We'll add some margin to the bottom here in a minute when we start playing with those margins. All right. So I said we would get more space to the left and right. I think what I will do is I will get that by adding the space, by adding the text, okay? So I'm going to put this down here at the bottom. So we'll do annotate, and then I'll move it up further once I've developed those axis labels, right? So we'll do geom equals text. Let me go ahead and put this on a separate line, okay? And then we'll do x equals, and I think this is 1. July 24 is at 1. And I think it goes left, right, like half a unit. So if I do like x equals 0, and then y equals 100, 200, 300, and then I can do label equals c 100,000. Actually, it's plus 100,000, right? Plus 100,000, plus 200,000, plus 300,000. Now what we see is that we've added space, right? Our text is center justified, so we'll want to modify that. So we'll do hjust equals 0. And so that gets us to be left justified on that value. The font is too big and it's not the right font, right? So when we're adding a geom like we are here with annotate, we need to add the family as Franklin. And let me go ahead and put some things on separate lines because this is getting a little bit funky. And then we'll do size equals, let's do 8. And I'll say size dot unit equals pt to get that size to be an 8 point. Okay, and so that shrank it down a bit. Thanks for joining us, Rents. And yeah, so let's go ahead and we'll raise it up a little bit because the number is sitting on the line, right? And so put like 10, let me do the bottom one at 3, the middle one at 5, and this one at, let's say 8. I'll try 3 different values and see which one looks the best. I think the 8 actually works the best. So I'm going to use the 208 and 108 for those positions. That moves that up. I think the font is maybe a smidge too small. So let's take that up to say 9. All right, I'll take it down to 8.5 and stop fiddling with it. All right, cool. But we want that font to be gray. probably the same gray as the title and the caption. And so that was gray 40, right? And put the cursor in the wrong place. So we'll do color equals gray 40. And I think that's good. I think that's pretty good placement. It could maybe be to the right a little bit more if I mean, relative to the grid line, right? But we perhaps need more space. And so let's worry about X first. So let's do like negative 0.3. And that is moving it over. Let me put these on top of each other so we can kind of see how they relate to each other. And then we also have a bit of margin. All right. All right, so I think that's pretty good. So we need a little bit of more space to the left. So let's do 0.5. And all right, I'll go to 0.4, negative 0.4. All right. So I think that's good. But like I was saying, I think there's a little bit of space between the start of the grid line and the text itself. And so I used 0 for left justified. 1 would be right justified. 0.5 is center. But I think what I could do would be like negative 0.2 to move it over further, right? So that moved it over quite a bit. So let's go to like 0.05. I think that, yeah, I think that's really good. So there's a little bit of space you can see between the plus sign and the start of the grid line. And I think that's a really nice effect. All right. So that gets us that tail, if you will, on the right. And I think we've got a pretty good space on the right. Yeah. So now what I want to do is let's go ahead. I still need to add these text elements, but let's go ahead, and since we're fiddling with the titles and everything, let's go ahead and play with the margin. And so theirs on the left and on the right are pulled in a bit, right? And so first, let me go ahead and grab this annotate, and I'll move it up to kind of put it with the other plotting stuff. I'll put it after geom call. And it's good to rerun things to make sure nothing changes when you move things around. All right. And so then here we'll add plot.margin equals margin. And L, let's do 20, R equals 10. I don't know if that's right, but it'll get us something to work with. And wow, that actually worked really well. I'm pretty surprised by how well that worked. On my right, I can probably pull it in a little bit more. So let's maybe make this 15. Good. Of course, we need to worry about the margins at the top and bottom now. And so they like the default arguments are TRBL, top, right, bottom, left, so trouble. So if we do T equals 5, right equals 15, B, bottom equals 5, left equals 20, get rid of that comma. The vertical placement on all these things looks pretty good. Maybe I could have a little bit more space on the bottom on mine. Mine's the one in the back. So maybe I'll put this up to 10. Okay, too far. We'll do 8. That looks great. My title could maybe come down a little bit. Maybe I'll make that 8 as well. And that's pretty good. I could maybe put a margin below my title to get the grid lines to line up between the two. So if we come back up to plot title and I do margin equals margin, B equals, let's try 10. Wow, that did a good job. So that put more space between my title and the plot, right? And so what I was looking for is to have my grid lines line up with their grid lines. And I think that looks really good. Of course, the title and the caption are left justified on the plot and the y-axis for this case, but we want it to be like a hanging indent, so we want it to go back to the left, but not all the way to 0, right? And so my left margin was 20. So if I do L equals 10, or actually minus 10, that'll pull it left. And so now we can see that that did pull it left, and I think that's a pretty good amount to pull it. This is mine on the bottom. That maybe we could go left a little bit more. And so let's do like -15. I think that's good. And so we'll do -15 on the caption as well. And then we'll do L equals -15. Cool. So there's subtle differences, I think, in the font and in the color. I'm not going to worry about that because we're already kind of running a little bit long here on this episode. And we still have the text here and these annotation lines to add, right? But so far, I think we're doing pretty well and comparing or recreating their plot with ours. So I think the first thing I'll do is go ahead and add the text. I'm going to do that with an annotate function. And so I'm going to try to do it with one annotate function, which will be a little bit hard because we have two different colors, right? We have black for these text blocks and gray here. We have two different types of font or font faces. So this is a regular font, and then the revised down is italicized. And we also have three different horizontal justifications, right? This one here is left justified, this is right justified, and this is center justified. The other thing that I'm noticing is that the grid line, if I look closely, doesn't really appear to go through the text, which makes me think that what we want to use is a label, because you can see, well, a label with some transparency. So we'll go ahead and add an annotate. We'll do geom equals label. And let's do these one at a time, kind of adding on to the total function. So for x, I'm going to start with this revised down. So this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's at like centered at 11.5. And I know I'm going to make this into a vector, so I'll start with my c's. My y is, again, it's centered just below 100,000. Let's say like 95. And then we'll do label, again, a vector. We'll do revised \n to get a line break down. And we'll also then want to add hjust, and that's going to be a vector. So we'll do 0.5 to get that to be centered. And vjust, I'm going to make everything centered vertically. And I forgot a comma here. And I got one too many parentheses here. All right. And so now we have added our label, right? And so it doesn't look fantastic. We're going to want to change the line height. We're going to want to make it italic, and we're going to want to change the font and the color. So we've got a few things to do here. So let's go ahead and do, let's do label dot, actually, I forget what the argument is. If I do geom label, then what we see is label R is the, or label size is the, yeah, label size is the thickness of the label. Okay. So if we do label dot size equals 0, then that goes away. And then we also want to do like label dot padding equals 0. Oh, it wasn't happy about that. Let's look back at the help here. Label dot padding. Oh, it takes a unit. Okay. We'll do 0 pt. There we go. No error message now. And we can see, right. We can see that there's no label, but that our lines for the bars don't run through the text or behind the text as much. So let's go ahead and make that transparent. And we can do that with alpha. Let's do 0.8. And I think that looks pretty good relative to theirs. Let's go ahead and bring in the family. And we'll do Franklin. And we'll also do size equals, let's do 8. And then size unit equals PT. Okay, that's too small. So let's up it to like 10. Good. And so let's do color as a vector. And the color we want is going to be like our title. And our title was that gray 40. So let's try gray 40. All right. That's good. We want it to be italics. So then we're going to want to do font face as italic. Forget if it's italic or italics. Let's roll with that. No errors, so I think we got it right. It's italicized it. And now we need to shrink the line height. So we'll then do line height equals 0.9. So that brought it together maybe a little bit. No, I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's good. Maybe we could go up to, what does 1 look like? That's probably better. We'll roll with that. That's cool. That's also, I think, a lighter font than theirs. So I'm going to go ahead and use my bold. So maybe I'll do bold.italic. And now what we have is that stronger italic. So I think that's pretty good. Again, it doesn't match their font perfectly, but I think it's pretty good. I use 10. If I go down to 9, whatever. I think that's good. All right, I'll leave that there. So we've got one label in here. And hey, Lori, thanks again for joining. It's great to have you. And now let's go ahead and add these 2 other blurbs. So I'll start here. And we'll plop this in. Get double quotes just to be consistent. And then we'll go ahead and put in line breaks here after that first and then after the than. All right, so that's that. So we need an X position. And so the X position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is the center here. So I think it's probably like 7.75. And our Y is going to be centered at 200,000. So I'll go ahead and put in the 200. The H just is going to be 0 because that is left justified. And our color is going to be black. And then our font is, I think, regular is the term. And I think that should do it. Oh, it's unhappy, invalid font face, regular. Is it plain? It's plain. All right. And I think that should be bolded to match kind of the strength or the weight of this one. So instead of plain, after all that, let's do bold. And I think that is looking good. Cool. Now we want to add this 73,000 jobs in July. Hopefully you kind of get the gist of what we're doing here. And we want a line break between jobs and in. And all right, so the X position is going to be, so this is 13. So I think 13.5 is the right edge. And then our Y, I'll say it's at about like 270. Again, it's going to be center justified there. And then H just is going to be right justified with the 1. We're also going to use black. We're also going to use bold. And I think that's the only thing we have to change. Cool. And so now we have that in position, and that looks great. Wonderful. Hopefully we're making some progress here. You all understand and keep track of what I'm doing. I think the last thing we need to do is to add these annotation lines. And so to make an annotation segment, there's a geom called segment that is a straight line. And there's also one called curve, which will make a curve like this one, right? So I'm going to have to do this in 2 steps because we have a straight line and a curved line, but it'll be all good. So we'll start with the vertical line because I think that'll be easier. And so we'll do annotate. We'll do geom equals segment. And our x is going to be at 13, right? Because that's right in the center of July. And we'll have it go from, well, that's at 73. We know that, right? Because that's what the text here says. So we'll do y equals 73. Y end is going to go up to, let's say, 250. Let's try that. And that did not work for some reason. Oh, I didn't save it. All right, there we go. There's our line. Maybe the line shouldn't go up quite so far. And oh, I've got one too many parentheses here. So maybe we'll go to 240. Cool, that's good. And that line is a bit chunky. So let's do line width equals 0.3. And let's do 0.4. Okay, cool. All right, so that's one line down. I think that looks good. Now to think about this curved line, right? And we could probably clean this up a bit. All right. So again, we'll do annotate geom equals curve. And we're going to want an x end, a y, and a y end. And I'm going to do line width of 0.4. Yeah, so those are the 4 parameters we need. So let's start with the x's. So if this is 13, 12, 11, so it's going to go from 11 to 11 and a half, I think, right? We can set these values and we can change them later. It's all good. And then our y is going to start, I'm going to say that this is like 190 down to like 170. Okay. So again, we're setting the starting x and y coordinates for the curve and the ending for the curve. We did the same thing with this line segment. We didn't include x end because the default for x end is to use the same value as x. So let's run this and see what we get. All right, well, it's a start, right? I think my x positions are good. My y positions need to move down. And of course, I need to flip the orientation of the curve. So let's go down to like 180 and 150. Or let's do 160. All right. And then I don't recall the arguments for geom curve. So let's go ahead and look at those. So geom curve, curvature of 0.5, angle 90. So let's see what curvature and angle do. Let's see. Curvature, a numeric value giving the amount of curvature. Negative values produce left-hand curves, positive produce right-hand, and 0 produces a straight line. A numeric value between 0 and 180 for angle, giving the amount to skew the control points of the curve. All right, so I don't think we want that. So let's do curvature. And so we'll do curvature equals, so the default was 0.5. So if we do negative 0.5 to get the opposite direction, then that looks pretty good. I think maybe it could come down a bit. So let's go to like 150. Oh, let's do 155. And then maybe the X could come to the left a bit. Let's do 10.75. Oh, I don't know. I'm noticing it's got like this like little bit of tail downward versus being like a 45-degree angle. So if I take that back to 11, all right, let's go to 10.9. That's good. I'm going to leave that there. Okay. So I think those lines are pretty close to what we want, and we have that annotation looking good. Kind of looking at these side by side. Mine's on the left. Theirs is on the right. Just kind of quickly looking here to compare them. I think I did reasonably well at recreating their plot. Again, there's subtle differences in fonts. I'm using a free font that was available to me from Google Fonts. They're using something that's more proprietary. I don't know, maybe my font down here in the caption seems to be lighter than theirs. Who cares? On the whole, I think everything else looks pretty good. I guess if I wanted to change that caption here real quick, because I care, I could make it darker with like 30. I wonder if I'm using the bold for the caption. I'm not. Okay, let's try that. Face equals bold. I think that was the difference, was I wasn't using bold for the caption here. Whatever. But again, hopefully you've learned something in comparing and recreating this plot from the New York Times, which again is on the right. I think this was a lot of fun. Again, my takeaways or the things that I was interested in doing here was this issue with position in geom_call. We use position identity. We talked about how you could use position stack, which is the default. Basically having 3 different fill colors and 2 different color colors, and why we would use that, again, to get the border around those white rectangles. Putting the values up here on the y-axis, dealing with the x-axis and going back and forth between dates and characters. We talked about putting in these annotation blurbs, right? As well then as these annotation lines and curves, right? So again, if you want to play around with this, maybe go back and play with that x-axis to maybe get a more elegant way of representing or showing those dates on the x-axis. You can go to the blog post that will be down below in the description for this episode, where you can then go ahead, get the code and play with it yourself. I would love to see what you end up doing with the code, so feel free to put anything in the comments below. I really welcome that. And as you are perusing the media or scientific publications or anywhere that you see a data visualization and you see something that looks cool, something you're not sure how to do, feel free to email me at pat@rifamonas.org or put a link into a comment from one of the videos. I try to respond to all the comments, and I will try to work that into the schedule for an upcoming newsletter as well as video. All right, well, that's all I have for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please tell your friends what we're doing here, and I will see you next time for another live stream on the Rifamonas YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.